You are listening to Pocketful of Diamonds, Book 7 of the Nadia Wolf series, written by Nicolette Pierce. Copyright 2016. Audio copyright 2025 by Pierced Heart Publishing. Digitally narrated with full cast of voices.
Chapter 21. Gwen suggested the swim for a reason. When Ian had engaged with Divine, his hand had started shaking again. Always his right hand. She knew right away Ian was overwhelmed. It was easy to get sucked into Divine's madness. Thankfully, Divine was somewhat pliable today and believed Gwen's story. It bought them time, but not much. Gwen touched the turquoise water with her toe and smiled. It was cool enough to be refreshing, but not enough to chill. Perfect. She tossed off her robe and waded in.
Skinny dipping?
Ian questioned. Gwen turned to find him still on the shore. You aren't a prude, are you?
No, but...
He looked back at the building with the wall of windows facing them. Divine won't even bother to look out the windows, and neither will his minions. Dad is on the other side still looking for his puzzle piece. Poor Dad. They had stopped by his room on the way down to the beach. For someone who couldn't remember his own daughter, he was insistent about that piece. Gwen thought about making a substitute for him just so he could move on. That was a project for later. Right now, she wanted to swim. Ian shook his head as if clearing it and then muttered something under his breath. You don't have to swim if you don't want to.
It's not that.
He dropped his robe next to Gwen's and waded in after her.
We are swimming naked while a madman is plotting world diamond domination with an army of minions and go-go boots. Nothing makes sense.
Think of Divine as a civilized devil. She wrapped her arms around Ian's neck as they bobbed in the water. And I don't want to think about him right now. Later tonight, I'll tell you about a thought I had. Right now, I think I need a kiss.
That I can do.
He bundled her up tight against him and dropped his mouth to hers. The salty water kept them afloat as they played throughout the afternoon, forgetting about lunch and the problems that existed on the island only 100 yards away.
Back in the room, Ian paced between the window and the door. He wasn't sure if he'd like to fling himself through the glass or barrel out of the door. One thing he was certain of, however, was that he'd like to cut off his hand. It shook uncontrollably. While this was a best-case scenario prison, it was still a prison. After having a copious amount of pleasurable time in the water, life sobered again. They were back to square one. There was no escape, and Divine held all the cards.
Your hand is shaking again,
Gwen said softly, watching him from the couch. It's fine. He clenched his hand and then stretched it. That sometimes relieved the tension. It didn't help this time.
What happened before?
I'd rather not talk about it.
I told you everything about my situation because you said you would do the same. We promised.
He stopped at the window. He had promised, and was being unfair. But he couldn't get over the feeling she would look at him differently. He wouldn't survive that. Give me more time, please. She hesitantly nodded.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's your story to share, Ian. If you need time, that's fine. Just remember you can't keep it to yourself forever.
He sat down next to her and took her hand, relieved to find his hand stopped convulsing while touching hers. I'm worried, he whispered. I know we talked about finding his collection. But even if we did, and we convinced the authorities of the location, he could still turn the tables and say that we placed the items there for him to get caught.
That's true, which is why he needs to get caught in the act.
How would that happen?
I'd have to steal one more time and hand it off to him in a public place. Once he takes them.
Even if that worked, he would name you as an accomplice.
I already knew we'd both go down together.
She squeezed his hand.
But do me a favor and make sure my dad goes to a good home.
No, Ian stood. This plan was impossible and relied on too many improbable variables. Plus, he wasn't ready to let Gwen go. We're switching to a different plan.
We don't have any other options unless you're going to kill him.
Ian whipped around to face her. Why would you say that?
Because that's the only other option I know of.
He frowned and scrubbed a shaky hand along his face. Damn it. All of the plans end badly.
We have a week to come up with something better.
That means staying here a week.
I've done it before. We'll survive.
We've been summoned to have dinner with him in 5 minutes.
He's being polite.
Ian tossed up his hands.
I understand your frustration, believe me. It's good that we have this opportunity with Duvine. If we are careful, we might be able to gather more information.
It seems like a long shot.
All we have are long shots. If we don't make this one, we'll get the next.
He sat down next to her. How can you stay so positive? You've been dealing with this for so long.
Yes, but I never before had someone to stand with me. Think about it. 2 heads are better than 1. Plus we have the Dark Lions. We could use them somehow. All we have to do is wait for the right time.
The Dark Lions. Does your cell phone work here?
No, but there are phone lines.
She pointed to a phone on a small table across the room. He allows calls out.
I'm pretty sure the phones are monitored, but yes.
Ian scanned the room. I can't help but think he is listening to us right now.
I'm fairly sure this room isn't bugged since I'm normally the only one in it. We just need to keep our voices down. If it's not a bug, then it's a minion.
There was a knock on the door and Gwen stood.
Ready?
Since I have no other choice, yes.
Did you ever suck up to a parent to get something you wanted? Maybe butter them up a bit for a future request?
Doesn't every kid?
Pretend you're that kid now. It will help.
She started to walk to the door but stopped.
Also, act as if you are very besotted with me.
That I can do. Gwen grinned and shook her head slightly.
I don't know what I did right to deserve you.
We can discuss that in detail tonight. He winked. I wouldn't mind another massage. She laughed. But once the door was opened, she was quick to don her mask. Ian cut his asparagus into tiny pieces, anything to keep his hands busy.
How are you enjoying the honeymoon so far?
They had lobbied back and forth with inane conversations. Ian didn't want to talk, especially over a mile of table. But he did anyway. Your place is quite beautiful, Ian said, jabbing his fork into a green stick. The seclusion is relaxing. That was a lie. However, he did have to concede the bed and beach were to his liking. I hate to bring up business while eating, but do you have news of Najamba? I assume you still have a contact there?
I haven't heard anything, but I can make inquiries.
Ian hated not being able to see Duvine's expressions. His voice gave away nothing. I fear the government will seize the land, Ian said as he rolled the green sticks around on his plate. Someone with your clout probably wouldn't have a problem. No one would dare encroach on you. But me? He shrugged. They've already taken over once. Gwen raised a secret brow at him. While she had told him to suck up, she never told him to appear weak. Ian was sure she questioned him. As they had walked through the barren halls to dinner, a thought had consumed Ian. If every scenario ended badly, why not play the game everyone else seemed to be in on? If Duvine goes to jail, Gwen goes with. If Ian returns to Najamba, forced to mine on land he didn't yet possess, he will bring nothing but grief. They were stuck in the middle. Shouldn't the war now brew between the diamond mongers? Let them fight. Now all Ian had to do was to somehow remove himself and Gwen from the equation. That's where the process became fuzzy. How do you deal with your minds? Ian asked. I'm assuming with your vast diamond empire that you have a few.
I don't deal with the working part of the industry. I'm only looking for the final product. I stay clear of squabbles.
Ian twirled his fork. Would you have any security staff that you could lend to the mine? You do have a stake in the profits, after all.
I wonder about your motives.
I've told you my motives. They're simple.
Remind me.
Gwen, as well as her father, the people of Najamba, all I want is for them to be safe. If that means running a mine until it's dry, then I will comply. However, I can't if I have shooters in the village terrorizing and killing my workers, and if they end up killing me, then what? Duvine didn't say anything, so Ian busied himself with the asparagus again. He felt bad for the green spikes. They were really quite good, but he couldn't seem to digest anything. Breakfast had been light, though it still sat like a lump in his stomach.
I will check on Najamba for you. We will discuss this further when I have news.
Thank you. Duvine stood, and 2 minions hurried to flank him.
I bid you both good night.
When they were gone, Gwen looked to Ian.
You're up to something.
Ian smiled as he stood, offering a chivalrous arm to Gwen. I believe your father needs help with a puzzle. She returned the smile and didn't question further, but she probably didn't need to. Gwen was smart and knew what he was about. There was no need to speak and risk being overheard. The next morning, Ian and Gwen were summoned by Duvine. They sat at another long table, but this time in a sunlit room surrounded by a bird aviary. The cat on Duvine's lap didn't seem to care. He was perfectly content lounging.
It seems you were right to worry about Najamba. It has been occupied by the military. They are holding the rebels at bay.
Ian straightened. Is there word of the villagers? He had hoped once he left, they would be left alone.
They're in the hills, waiting it out.
Yes, but for how long? If they're discovered, it would mean slaughter, and for diamonds they don't even have. Gwen looked to Ian.
Do they think you're still in Sierra Leone?
It sounds that way. No one would bother with the village unless they think it would have monetary gain. And for both factions to stake out there, it means they're ready for a battle. They just need confirmation of the diamonds. Ian had to get word to the Dark Lions, but how could he without Duvine knowing? If Ian could relay the island location to Boma, perhaps he could use it to lure the militia away. And if they showed up at the island, Duvine would have to involve himself. But it also meant Ian would have to find an escape for Gwen and Bruce. There was only a seaplane that he didn't know how to fly. Ian didn't think he could get a message to Boma, but perhaps one of his brothers could. When they were younger, they used a code that no one but they could decipher. Not since the Navajo code talkers had there been a code so complex that it was unbreakable. Miller mayhem had ensued. Ian needed a moment to sit down and think, toss ideas around with Gwen. She knew the layout of the building and grounds. That would be key to a successful escape. This thought, while a kernel in size, had the potential to take down everyone, including them, if they weren't careful.